This is always a hot button issue for most brands, but particularly when you are starting your fashion brand. How do I price my product? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Mikkel Drew Pelham. I usually talk about digital fashion design software and communication on this channel, but today is going to be a slight departure because one, I've got a lot of fashion entrepreneurs and fashion creative followers out there who really need to understand how to better price their products. And two, this is a key part of merchandising, which is the first business course offered in the 383 Digital Design School. And I wanted to give you a short introduction to what you can learn from that class. So when it comes to pricing your product, the reason it can be such a hot button issue is because not only are the actual costs associated with it, but there's the emotional factor of your customer as well as brand positioning and brand perception. And here's what I mean. One of the things you'll hear buyers ask about your product is, who do you hang with? What they're asking is, if your product was hanging in a department store, what brand would it be sitting next to? Which basically goes back to the question of who is your competition? And I know for a lot of people, they may feel like, well, I have no competition, but trust me, you do. Think of it this way. If your customer wasn't buying from you, who would they shop with instead? It may not be that you're creating something totally different. You might be creating something similar, but just doing it better and with your spin on it. The point of all this is that your pricing should be in line with what your customer is used to. And that's not to say that you may not be a little more expensive. You probably will be if you're a new brand because you don't have the history or resources or relationships to negotiate better pricing just yet. But it also means that if your competitor is selling a comparable product for $200, yours probably can't be $400 or even $50. Less expensive isn't always better. Sometimes less expensive makes people suspicious, which inevitably means they won't buy. Hand in hand with that is your brand perception. If you've been marketing this brand as this luxury experience, the pricing should also go with that. Of course, the quality of your product needs to also live up to that. Let's not forget that part. But remember when I mentioned suspicion? A customer who is used to buying good quality products and is used to spending more money to get that quality will automatically be suspicious if all of a sudden you've got this luxury item that normally retails for $300 plus through your competitors, but now you're selling it for $99. The complete experience of your product needs to match your brand perception, and that includes your pricing. Now, keep in mind, I am not encouraging you to just slap a huge price tag on something that's worthless because, as I said, the quality of the product needs to match the price tag. But what I am saying is that for many of us, we want our cousins and aunties and friends to be able to wear our products. But the reality is that for many of us, our cousins and aunties and friends cannot afford what we're creating. And so sometimes we feel pressured to put a lower price tag on something so the family can buy it. And let me tell you, that is one of the quickest ways to put yourself out of business before you even get started. You have got to be profitable in order to stay in business. So make sure that you aren't intentionally lowering your prices or just guessing prices based on what you think someone can afford. And that leads me to my next point. This is another thing that Alicia discusses and has a whole chapter about in the merchandising course. Too often, many designers do not do enough research on who their customer is, and so they base their line on people they know or brands they already shop and have a very skewed perception of what they should be charging. Many of us, when we start our brands, we know our customers are out there, but we may not know them personally. So this is where your research comes into play. Visiting social spaces where your customer is or would be and asking questions, polling those people, asking if you can do focus groups, researching online, finding out who they shop and what they're willing to pay for a product like yours. Doing this research often surprises people. For many who are used to shopping at Target or H&M, which by the way, Nothing wrong with either, but clearly a much lower price point. We're often surprised that others are willing to spend at a much higher price point for certain items. This is a good thing, not just because it means you can charge more, but more importantly, having to charge $450 for a product because after you ran the numbers, you realized that the $150 you were going to charge was not going to work. Now doesn't seem so scary to type out that price next to your product on your website. So after you've thought about all of those other things, and you should get all of that straight first, even before you start creating your product, honestly. Now you can get into the actual numbers. I'm going to use this cost sheet template, which I'll also link below if you'd like to use it as well. If you've used my tech pack template, the header will look very familiar to you, and you'll fill out that info as well as add a sketch for a quick reference. Next, you'll start filling in the fabric, trim, and labor information. And note that you should only be inputting information under the purple columns. The other columns contain formulas which will auto-calculate. Add the name of your fabric, and if you have it, I would suggest even adding the mill information so it's clear exactly what fabric you're referencing. Fill in the price and the yield, which is how much of that fabric was used for the product. The amount or cost will automatically calculate based on that information. Add in additional fabrics as needed, and then add in freight. And the freight is how much it costs for the fabric to be transported to you or whomever is making the item, whether that be ground, shipping, USPS, bike messenger, however it got there. Do the same for your trims and then for the labor. And labor expenses might be a little tougher to calculate, but a manufacturer may give you an all-inclusive package that includes CMT, which is cut, make, trim, meaning they'll cut, sew, and trim the garment. Pattern making and grading, packaging, perhaps even shipping. Other times you might be the one who is doing some of this, like they may cut, make, and trim the garments, but you have to package and ship. So this will vary depending on your situation. Last thing to add is overhead, and this is probably more relevant for larger companies. Overhead is your expenses that are just part of operating. It might be things like worker salaries, the electric bill to keep the lights on or run the machines. And if you're getting a full package price from a manufacturer, the overhead is usually already calculated into the cost they give you, so you probably won't need to put anything in for this. Once all that info is added, you'll see a total cost, which is your break-even cost, a wholesale price, which is the total cost plus a markup, and this is the price you'd give to someone who's selling your products in their store. And lastly, a suggested retail price, which is what you'd suggest that buyer who's carrying your items should retail the items for. So there's a couple of aha moments here that most people, the first time they do this exercise, find. The first is that they've been severely underpricing their products and now truly understand why they aren't making much profit. The second is that they're now realizing how much it actually costs to produce one product, and they're kind of surprised and maybe rethinking if they even want to continue producing it. There's a few other nuances here, like this formula is tweaked a bit if you're only selling through your website. You may also need to tweak it if your markup or suggested retail price markup is different. And if you're not selling wholesale now, but you might want to in the future. As I mentioned earlier, Alicia goes in depth about all of this in our merchandising course, Maximizing Sales and Profit, the Power of Fashion Merchandising. So if you really want an in-depth understanding of how to properly price your products and get the right assortment and understand your customer and do sales projections, you want to take that course. Thanks for watching this week's video. If you want to grab my free costing template, click the link in the description. And if you know you really need to better understand your customer, how to create an assortment, costing, and more, so you can make more sales in your fashion business, click the link in the description to our fashion merchandising business course. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video if you find it helpful. Have a fantastic week, and I'll see you next time.